Sometimes the best things are hiding in plain sight. And in my job as a bookseller, I often see people raving about books, buying the latest trilogy, seeing things shooting into the bestseller charts, and they're wondering what to read next. And so often they pass over the things which they really would enjoy. So today I'm going to talk about a trilogy and review the first book in a trilogy which has been around a while and which I think is one of the finest traditional genre SF trilogies of recent years, and it's something I feel people should go back to or go to, and I've gone back to it recently because I really like this writer and really just sort of bring it back into people's consciousness. So today we're going to talk about Chris Beckett's Dark Eden, and this won the Arthur C. Clarke Award in 2013 in hardcover. There'll be a Chris Beckett overview coming up, which I'll show you all his books, including the hardcover firsts. And also there's already been an interview with Chris on the channel. I've mentioned him several times because he's one of my favourite contemporary SF writers, and he's easily one of the best, but I really don't think he's getting the commercial attention he deserves. So today we're going to review this and I'll let you know a bit more about it because I've just gone back to it and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Dark Eden is a cold planet somewhere out in space. It seems to have no nearby star, so perhaps it's an outer planet in a system distant from its sun, and a rich galactic cluster swirls in the sky above it, possibly the Milky Way. We don't really know. Now, it's unlikely to be a wandering planetoid, for Dark Eden has large animals and plant life, and the evolutionary origin of this ecosystem is hinted at later in the novel, but I'm not going to give you any spoilers. The ecosystem contains both phytophages and predators in its ecological pyramid, so it's very rich in life despite being a very dark, sunless world. And many of the animals have bioluminescent decorations, so the ones which are, say, rather like deer have the equivalent of antlers which light up, or other animals have things like the lures of anglerfish. So there is some light and colour in this dark world, and the trees of Eden seem to be rooted in geothermal activity underneath the ground, and often themselves are illuminated. So despite Eden being an obsidian realm that is moonless, its lights are often flashes of bright colour and variety. Eking out a subsistence hunter-gatherer lifestyle on Eden are the 6th generation descendants of a spaceship crash, people from Earth. And all 532 people who are there on Eden are descendants of a single couple from that crash, who are called Angela and Tommy. They were stranded on the planet, but 3 of their other contemporaries have departed on board a shuttlecraft which is headed for the mothership, which is orbiting around Eden, which is dubbed Defiant. The plan is that the trio who have left in the shuttlecraft will return to Earth in Defiant via what sounds like a wormhole, a collapsar jump, as Joe Haldeman will put it, and they'll send a rescue team back from Earth for Angela and Tommy. Now, this narrative, which the reader learns from the conversations and rituals of the descendants of these people who call themselves the family, immediately raises questions in the mind of the reader. And as we learn more of the stories around which the family structure their belief system, that one day they'll be saved and conveyed to Earth, which is a bright planet, the home they feel they should be living upon, questions arise about the relationship between the original 5 space travellers and their factional status. Now, Chris Beckett infodumps seamlessly without ever seeming to, and he stains the novel with his consummate gift for shimmering storytelling, outlining this scenario with a compositional ease that marks the master plotter. So the story proper begins with the main first-person point of view protagonist narrator, John Red Lantern, and the people of the family often take this surname from the trees around them, the different coloured illuminating trees. And although Beckett employs other first-person characters, mainly supporters of John rather than his antagonists throughout the novel, our story begins with the main first-person point of view protagonist, John Red Lantern. And what you'll find throughout the novel is the people's surnames, even though they're all related, are taken from the different types of tree which surround them. And although Beckett employs other first-person characters, mainly supporters of John rather than those who are antagonistic toward him throughout the novel, generally John is the focus character with the biggest voice. And at the beginning of the story, he's an adolescent and he's gently straining against the traditions and the paradigm that his family have cleaved to. And he begins his ascent to agency when he kills a super predator right at the beginning of the novel. Fittingly, this predator is called a panther, and it reminded me of the Quirl, the Black Destroyer of A. Van Voogt's story, which opens Voyage of the Space Beagle. So there's a kind of homage there, I think, to that, the motherlode of space opera and space exploration. And the description of the panthers that sing in beautiful voices reminds you of Greek myths. It made me think of the sirens, and they have smooth black flesh. So they are like panthers on Earth, even though the creatures on Eden, they tend to have green meat and their blood is green, so they're not like mammals on Earth. But it is quite interesting, and Beckett paints this ecosystem really, really well. Doesn't go over the top, it's just right, it's just enough for you to know how the family survive and thrive. Now, John rather rankles at the hidebound, clinging to legend that the family always exhibit, and this has kept them united, but it's discouraged them from exploring and making new things. For they believe that they have to stay within the environs of where they've been living for generations, near to a certain location that is key to their eventual escape from Eden. And this belief is based on the tales and rules passed down from the parents of them all, from Angela and Tommy 160 years previously. So yes, everyone on Eden is related. Everyone's incestuous, and although many of them are healthy, inbreeding has inevitably resulted in genetic anomalies from this small gene pool. So some of the family have hair lips, and clawed feet are also common. But this is Eden, and as the biblical connotation indicates, there's no murder, no violence between the family, and everybody cares for each other. But John wants more. He wants to eat from the tree of knowledge and see what lies beyond. Now, the family have their own vocabulary. It's English, yes, but it's subtly and slightly mutated over time, and it doesn't go too far. It's not like reading Ridley Walker or one of those polyglottal novels that's very difficult to digest and that gets in the way of the enjoyment of the story. That can happen when it's not done really well. They tend to emphasize meaning by repetition, which is reminiscent of the Newspeak of Orwell's 1984, and Beckett has been compared to Orwell in this and other books, especially the Turing Test, his collection of short stories which won the Edge Hill Prize. The sort of language that the family use reminded me particularly of the Double Plus Good of 1984. So for freezing, they say cold, cold. For exceptionally clever, they say wise, wise, and so on. But this is not a difficult read, as I say, anything but, because it fully immerses the reader as Beckett robustly seduces you with a steady, steady drip of backstory detail and the briskly expressed intimacy of the family's lives. For intimate they are all slipping with each other promiscuously to ensure that a new generation is rising. And slipping obviously comes from the colloquial term to slip somebody something, but it also sounds like sleeping with. So they are having intercourse quite a lot, and it's a natural part of their lives. But this never really feels salacious or crude. It feels natural, and more often than not, it's expressed tenderly, of solace in a harsh environment. And there's a strong maternal aspect to the book as well, which initially feels a bit queasy, but you gradually grow used to, because these people know nothing else. Now, of course, there is trouble in Eden in the Bible, and John, dissatisfied with the mythology which may never realize his desired end, with his desire to stretch a point and challenge the hegemony of the family, takes a step that is profound and shocking. This action makes him the subject of a certain amount of animus, and from then onwards he transforms into a leader, a capable visionary, And this reflects on the great biblical outsiders, on Ishmael, Cain, and even John the Baptist from the New Testament. So heading a cadre of explorers feeling an affinity with John's weird, with John's fate, or rather his willingness to challenge tradition and seek the new through sheer charisma, they follow John beyond. For after all, what if some of the stories, or all of them, handed down by the family are fallacious or fragmentary? So throughout Dark Eden and its sequels, because there's the sequels, they're Mother of Eden and Daughter of Eden, which take the story further. I'm not going to talk about them because I want you to discover it for yourselves. Beckett sort of grips your attention really effortlessly, and he strikes a balance between the quietly descriptive and the pacey, and he interpolates plot and counterplot with an easy authority around sympathetic, credible and well-motivated characters, none of whom feel superfluous, even though there's quite a few of them. There is a tendency in a lot of novels these days with lots of characters, big novels, that they are kind of superfluous, and you never really feel you need a cast of characters, and there isn't one printed in this book, because that's really a bit naff when that does happen. And at no time does the reader really feel they need to unpick what's going on, and yet neither is the resolution and the revelations that he puts before you obvious. Now, in other hands, this book would be mere confectionery, but in Beckett's, with his linguistic sophistication and understated invention, he achieves a meshing of entertainment and art without seeming to break stride. He really, really is quite special. And his depiction of certain things, particularly his characterization of John, who you really feel for, and yet at the same time you can see why people get annoyed with him at some times, with details like the panthers and the various animals and wildlife on Eden and the hints of his cosmology. The best thing about the book is the traditional storytelling skill, the art of gradual revelation, which Beckett opens gently like the petals of a blooming flower. And, you know, it really is a very stately read that you don't rip through. You can if you like, but you really enjoy the process. And he really shows you a masterclass in the process of good old-fashioned storytelling in an interesting milieu. And as I say, there are two other sequels, and this is the current livery that the trilogy is in. And as I showed you earlier on, this is what the book's like originally, and you'll see the first editions in my Beckett overview that's coming up. Now, this book does have precedence, and in some ways that's what's good about it. It reminded me of some other things, and it reminded me particularly of somebody who would have been an influence on Chris. That's Brian Aldiss. So I've talked about quite a bit on the channel recently, and there will be more because I'm returning to Brian's work, and that actually pushed me back towards Chris's work, which I really, really like. And now Chris is working on a new book after a period of inactivity because he was very unwell last year, and he's on the mend beautifully, I'm really pleased to say, which is really good news. And the things which it reminded me of, which you may be familiar with or not, are Hothouse. And this is one of Aldiss's best early novels, presented here in the Penguin Modern Classics edition, which is now the UK standard one. Very beautiful. And this is incredibly inventive, imaginative book, which depicts Earth in the far future when it stopped rotating and one side faces the sun, and vegetables have taken the place of animals. Animals have pretty much died away. People have shrunk and become green and live in the trees. And it's got that sort of picaresque feel. And the whole way that the biosphere of this is depicted is fantastic, and has incredible linguistic inventiveness. Jack Vance, I feel, most possibly an influence on this, and possibly Aldis counter-influenced him. And I could certainly feel a shadow of this in Dark Eden. And also the need for a community to grow and thrive and change and discover, which is also in Aldis's Non-Stop, the definitive Generation Starship novel for me. And I think those two books, which are two of Aldis's finest novels, almost certainly would have had an influence over Dark Eden and its sequels. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't read Dark Eden, because if you're an Aldis fan, an old school SF reader who knows these texts like the back of his hand, I think you really enjoy them. A book which I didn't enjoy so much from the early 60s, a similar time to the Aldis books, which did remind me a lot of Dark Eden, is Dark Universe by Daniel Galloy, which I read recently. I can't say I enjoyed it. This is similar in that this is a post-apocalyptic novel where people are living in caves underground, and they have primitive religious style beliefs similar to those in, say, Ridley Walker, about what happened with the apocalypse, and they live in the dark, and it's completely dark, and they become echolocative like bats. They can hear the shape of people, almost like a second sight. And it's not entirely convincing, but very detailed. And there's a lot in this about taboo breaking, similar sort of thing. But I think Beckett does a far better job. But it has to be said that Gloy and Aldous were there earlier. But that's the nature of the beast. It's not a bad book. I just didn't find it very convincing. And that may seem like a strange thing to say about a science fiction novel based on this sort of conceit, but it didn't quite do it for me. So if you haven't read Chris Beckett and you like good traditional SF, I would say try Dark Eden and its 2 sequels, and they'll entertain you. If you're an old school fan and you know this kind of thing like the backyard, you'll still really enjoy it because he has real facility. And Chris went through an early period which was more traditional SF, but very, very well written. And then after the Eden trilogy, he becomes more like a new wave writer. And I'll talk about that in the overview to come. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Do seek out Dark Eden. It's a wonderful bit of world building, great bit of storytelling, wonderful characters linger in the mind. And, you know, it's a great read. It's not incredibly grim, even though it is dark, and you can sort of see this incredible bleak landscape with these lights from trees and animals, and it really is quite beautiful. It would make a fantastic film, though of course it'd be a very shadowy one. This is Outlaw Bookseller signing out for now. More Chris Beckett to come soon. Bye.